Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here with a continuation of our OBR Battletome analysis series. But as we mentioned before, it's not really mainly about OBR, even though we're using them as a case study. What we're really trying to do is see how someone with a relatively high amount of experience with analyzing Battletomes on a kind of nitty-gritty level approaches such a thing for the first time in real time, so that those of you out there that could maybe gain some skills from seeing how someone that's more experienced does this, or just does it in a different way than you, could benefit from this sort of thing. So before we move on to a quick explanation and review of what we're doing here, just a reminder to join the Discord, comment below, let us know what you thought of the video, and stay tuned for more videos. Alright, so looking at our series summary here, we've already covered in our first video the generic battle traits for Ossiarch Bone Reapers. And so check the link out here above if you haven't checked that out yet. The series is going to probably be in the neighborhood of 8 videos or so, and we're actually splitting the battle line up for this video, into 2 videos, because we do we start with a generic pitch battle profiles analysis for a few minutes, and then focus on the 2 unconditional battle line units in OBR, the Mortek Guard and the Cavalry version. So, and then after that, we're going to follow it up with the 4 conditional battle line units, which would be the more elite guys that you can get either by bringing a specific general in your army, or by having a couple other models as just included in your army, as you'll see. But thereafter, we're going to cover the sub-factions, and then we're going to look at spell lore, including, well, the endless spells themselves. So you could look at a spell lore plus 3 endless spells. And then we're going to be checking out the enhanceable heroes, as in those that can take command traits or artifacts, followed by those artifacts and command traits themselves, the enhancements. And then we'll kind of be looking at the rest, which might be split up into 1 or 2 videos. As I mentioned before, it's possible that we'll do a list building video as kind of a summary of everything that I've gathered from this, but we'll see. And that could be kind of a crossover between this series, the Battletome analysis series, and the list building series that I started recently with the knapsack spam video. So again, I'm going to go through these really quickly. This series is supposed to be about like having a different perspective here. It's the point is that it's experienced Battletome analysis. It has less to do with OBR itself, and it's focused on learning one's army with a new book, whether that new book is simply an update to the previous book for that faction, or you're trying to learn an army from the ground up for the first time. And as such, it's not really a Battletome review, even though I guess you could look at it that way over time, but it's going to end up being more than 4 hours worth of content. So maybe that's great for those of you OBR fans out there that really want an in-depth alternative approach to a Battletome review, but that's not really what we're trying to do here. And as such, this kind of approach is applicable to all armies, not just OBR. So I hope you get something out of it. Let me know in the comments. And yeah, let's get on to the content.
So now that I've taken a look at the generic battle traits for the whole army, there are a few different routes I could possibly take for what I want to look at next. One logical decision would be to probably look at the sub-faction abilities, as in like Petrifex Elite and Crematorians and so forth. But I often find with an army that I don't really know a whole lot about, this is less intuitive of how strong those individual abilities really are until you get to know the units they're impacting. And I don't really know the units in this army so well. So another thought would be, well, the next thing that comes after your, your generic battle traits is the command traits and artifacts. But once again, I don't really know who they could be going on and what units they're going to be buffing. So in an army like this, where I don't know as much about it, I like to jump straight to the pitch battle profiles to get a sense for what kind of battle line I have. And you know, how many units I'm working with. So let's take a look at some basic things. All right, so shifting down here a bit. So it's got most of it in the screen. All right, as per typical, they list things based off of what their battlefield role are alphabetically, which is a little silly, but artillery is also always at the top, which, all right, fine, whatever makes you happy. But we see there's one artillery piece, and that's the Mortek crawler. I already knew this, so that's not too shocking. Then we have two what I call unconditional battle line. That would be our Cavallos, Death Riders, and Mortek Guard. We're seeing that we get 5 of the cavalry for 170, which is pretty elite cavalry-esque, but not extreme elite. It's like mid-elite, maybe. And Mortek Guard, 10 for 150, so 15 points a model. Okay, those are our unconditional battle line. As we scroll down, we see that we've got a bunch of leaders and then a couple leader behemoths, which would be the two obvious choices, which are Archon and Nagash. A few unique characters in them, and then Vokmorshin, Master of the Bone Tithe, and then Archcavallos, Xantos, and Catacros, which obviously everyone knows about. And then we get to our normal units that aren't artillery or whatever. Interestingly, the Gothazar Harvester is not artillery, even though he's kind of a big model. So you can just kind of take as many of those as you want, but he can't be battle line. So within your battle line and having at least one leader as your general restrictions. And then we see we've got 3 endless spells down here, plus a faction terrain piece. So the rest of the units that are squeezed between the Gothazar Harvester and the beginning of the endless spells are all potentially battle line options. So if we look at those, we've got Immortis Guard. This is an elite unit, 3 for 200. Their battle line, if your general is a Mortisan. Now, I don't know which things qualify as Mortisans, but it's relatively safe to say that these 3 Mortisan named units, or 4 units here, are probably all Mortisan keyworded. So the Mortisan Bone Shaper, Ossifactor, Soul Mason, and Soul Reaper. This seems kind of similar to the Ideneth Isharon heroes, where they all have a similar title and then have a keyword. And I would guess maybe that Vokmorshin is also a Mortisan if you wanted to make, or maybe one of these unique heroes is, which would give you the chance to turn them on as conditional battle line. Morghast Archai, this is 2 for 240. So these are the big guys with wings, I know that. And I think Immortis Guard, those are the guys with the 3 faces that swing around. So this is battle line if your army includes Nagash or Archon. It says include, so it doesn't have to be your general. That said, I think Nagash is a War Master and Archon is probably also a War Master in OBR. So even if it did say general, it would still be matched. And then the other version of the big wing guys, which is 2 for 240, is same price, same thing. So you can turn a lot of these things on. You can make your general Mortizan, which turns on Immortis Garden, as we see here, Necropolis Stalkers, the other version of that kit. So that's 3 for 220, so they're a little bit more pricier than the Immortis Guard. So if you have a general that's a Mortisan, and you also have Nagash or Archon in your list, basically all of your battle line turns on. That's pretty cool. There aren't that many armies that can turn on every single option in every single build. Naturally, Nagash is pretty expensive, but Archon I think is reasonable. Let's see. Archon is 370, yeah, totally reasonable. So you take him and you take a Mortisan as your general, and then boom. You can take any combination of Cavallos, Death Riders, Mortek Guard, Immortis Guard, Necropolis Stalkers, and the 2 Morghast, Archai, and Harbingers units. They didn't add any new regular, I call them iterable units that can be reinforced or that exist out of more than one model. They didn't add any new things to the army. They added the one guy that's like the bone guy. I forget which one that is. It's probably the Ossifactor, but even that I'm not 100% sure about. But this is just a typical 3rd edition book where they're mainly just bringing it in line with 3rd edition and not really adding much to the line except for the one FOMO box hero. Interestingly, we haven't really had a FOMO box in a while. I think the last one was Lumneth Zinch. So I guess they just decided that even though they were releasing a lot of books simultaneously with one potential hero, maybe it wasn't necessary. So we have 3 endless spells at 50, 40, 40, so reasonable prices. I guess we'll have to see what they do. Worth mentioning, I do think of endless spells as a battle trait in the sense that not all armies have them, and they can add a lot of value to the army, and they're only used, you can't even use them if your allies are coalition, bringing in, like, let's say OBR's allies are coalition. You can only use them as if you're actually playing OBR. So it really is tied to being an OBR player. And then we've got the terrain feature, which of course costs nothing and is huge, the Bone Tide Nexus. Interestingly, this is one of the few armies that has absolutely no allies. I'm not even sure if that's true for Gargants. I think it might be for Gargants still, for Sons of Behemoth, that there's no allies. But in any case, most armies have at least one ally. So that's pretty rare. They're very much on their own, which is weird because, like, Death is such a unified army. You'd think Soulblight would have something to do with it, but maybe someone that knows the lore could, you know, chime in on that. Anyway, so this is how I kind of break down the pitch battle profiles. I'm not writing a whole lot in this because there's not much to do, but later I've been known to add things like which units have flying, which units are wizards, just so you can kind of quickly assess that if you don't know the list of potential units in the army. I've also been known to, as the points change, cross them out and then either draw an arrow that's up or down and then write the new points value in there. And of course I have to repeatedly do that, but hopefully GW doesn't go too crazy on moving things around so the book becomes a nightmare. But yeah, I like doing that so that this is always right. Anyway, so that's the pitch battle profiles. All right, so now that we've covered which units are battle line, again, since I don't really have a good sense for what the units do in this army, other than they're kind of slow and tanky, and obviously now that I know the battle traits, they can use a lot of those extra command traits. What I like to do is go through, maybe instead of starting with, like, the very first War Scroll is Nagash, but that's kind of an exception, and then Archon, and then a whole bunch of heroes that are basically adding synergy to your army. But what I'd rather do is go through the battle line units first to get a sense for even what's possible. So let's start with the most battle line of battle line, which would be our Mortek Guard. They're unconditional battle line, and they're regular small dudes. I think it was 10 for 150. So I'm looking at the War Scroll. There's certain things I ignore, like the italicized text here, and then this description here. That's great for lore stuff, but generally speaking, it's not a big deal to me. Now, one point of kind of contradiction to what I just said is that this text here is what tells you how they're armed and is italicized and important. So it's not, but it's in bold, so maybe that's the difference. Let's take a look at that real quick. Each model in a Mortek Guard unit is armed with one of the following weapon options: a Naderite Blade or a Naderite Spear. All models in the unit must be armed with the same weapon option. Now that's something that you don't always see. Like, I think Varangard can choose different things, and in second edition books, this was a little bit more flexible and sometimes less obvious. And then it says 1 in every 10 models can replace their weapon option with a Soul Cleaver Great Blade. So every time you reinforce it, basically, you're getting, let's assume that the Standard Bearer works the same way. I can see that it's 1 in every 10, and then 1 champion. So you're getting 1 champion max, plus however many times 10 you have, you get a Standard Bearer, and you can take a Soul Cleaver Great Blade. Normally you want to take that, but we can analyze the profile and see. So what I'm going to do, I always write here that this is an or weapon option, so that when I look at the War Scroll, let's say I'm playing out of the book, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, well, all of my guys have this profile and this profile and this one. And then I write 1 out of 10 right here for the Soul Cleaver Great Blade, so that I know it's actually 9 of these plus whatever. Now, interesting to note, whenever you have like an elite weapon like this, it can technically be given to the champion, but let's see if the champion gets to make the most of it. So the champion, one model in this unit can be a Mortek Hecatos. Add 1 to the attacks characteristic of that model's Naderite Spear or Naderite Blade. Meaning, don't give him the Great Blade if you want to be able to use that extra +1 attack. Now, that's not 100% easy to say because we need to analyze. Maybe it's actually better to give him this thing anyway and just give it up. But usually that's not the case. Because if you think about it, well, you could just have +1 attack on a regular weapon and then you still get this. So let's not do that. And then, so I'm going to just go ahead and write a note. Not Great Blade. Usually the kits are modeled as such, like the champion has a special model and he just can't even be given the Great Blade. So you don't have to worry about that unless you get creative with your modeling, but like in general, it's not a problem. So Standard Bearer, the normal thing, 1 in every 10, and add 1 to run rolls and charge rolls for this unit if it includes any Necrophoroi. Easy, right? I love that they pluralized this as though it were Greek, which is great. Necrophoros is the singular and Necrophoroi or whatever. Kind of like our channel, Strategoi, which I know we're mispronouncing, or at least I am. Okay, so that's your normal stuff. Interestingly, they don't have a musician. That's fine. Doesn't really make a big difference. And they're getting +1 to run and charge. A lot of times the musician just gives them +1 bravery, and not in addition to already having bravery 10, they don't need it because they're battle shock immune. So there you go. Might as well look at the circle while I'm talking about it. 1 wound, 4-up save, 4-inch move. So they are as slow as I said earlier. They're dwarf speed. So there's that. I also sometimes like to look at the keywords right now. They try to list them umbrella terms down in the new book. So Death is the Grand Alliance, OCR Bone Reapers is the faction, and then in this case, super simple, Mortek Guard. So they are just, what's it called? Their own keyword. I'm thinking about Nagash's War Scroll, and I know for a fact his ability to bring things back and summon stuff was keyworded to, I'm trying to think, there was one that was, maybe it said OCR Bone Reapers. I'm going to have to go back and look. I read it in the new Soulblight book. But one of them was summonable, which is obviously not literally Soulblight, but is a specific type of Soulblight keyword. And then we had 2 other things. Obviously, one was for Feck, or maybe one was for Night Haunt too. I'm going to have to go back and look at that. I'm sure it's the same War Scroll in this book, but that's interesting. And I'm wondering if these guys apply, because unless the keyword is Ossiarch Bone Reapers, I don't think they do. But it doesn't make sense that they wouldn't. I don't know. He wouldn't be worth his points in this army if not. All right, so they have 1. Before I go analyzing any of these weapon profiles, I like to see what the rest of their abilities do, just in case it has an impact on the math that I do. But let's see. It's a command ability. You can use this command ability at the start of the combat phase. So start and the combat phase. I'm assuming it's both, but let's read further. The command can only be issued by this unit's Mortek Hecatos, so is the champion, and this unit must receive the command. So you're not giving it out to anyone else, and it's coming from within. Ignore modifiers positive and negative to save rolls for attacks that target this unit in that phase. Okay, so yes, that is both. It's eligible in both combat phases. So this is interesting in the sense that, like, you're getting essentially an ethereal save. But the problem is they're sitting on a 4-up. And if you're on a 2-up, that's amazing. A 3-up's pretty good. 4-up is not bad, but like, if you could have save stacked with Mystic Shield and all-out defense, this is way worse, unless the rend is of a particular, like, is particularly high, where it wouldn't make much of a difference. So, yeah, interesting. So that impacts their save profile. So what I usually do first is I just go ahead and up here, I write what their wounds absorption is. And if you've seen my Math Hammer videos, I'm not going to explain it too much. I do a bracket, and then I say what their wounds absorption is, how many wounds you have to throw at them, or how many, like, successful to hit and wound rolls you have to pass on to them if there's no rend, 1 rend, 2 rend, and 3 rend. I don't do mortal wounds because usually it's not necessary. Now, I'm not going to take into account the 6+ ward because maybe some armies can ally this army in. This might seem like unnecessary work, and I'm not going to do it with every single war scroll. I'm going to not explain it as much, but The reason I do it is because the 6+ ward is coming from the allegiance abilities, not from the war scroll itself. So if you could ally this this unit in, I'm pretty sure you can't. I think Soulblight had what's it called? Flesh Eater Courts and Nighthaunt as allies, and not, I think because in the same way that these guys can't take allies, they also can't be taken as allies in any of the armies. So tell you what, I'll break my rule and I'll go ahead and take in the 6+ ward as default. So there's two ways I can do this. Essentially, I'm just going to write it out. 4+ save is essentially a 2 times multiplier. So it's 2 wounds times 1.2 for the 6+ ward. So if there's no rend coming in, each guy can absorb 2.4 dice worth of rolls, which I know seems like a weird number, but then if it's, I'm doing a little math here, it's 1.8 if it's at rend -1. If it's rend -2, oops, it's 1.44. And if it's rend -3, there's no normal save anymore, and it's 1.2. That's with the ward taken into account. That might seem like a nebulous number, but this does give me some information about how tanky this unit is. This is already better than some units, for sure. And then if it can get better, so this is the base, if it can get better, which it kind of does here, then it's going to look like this. It's going to be a 4-up save fixed no matter what. So that's 2 wounds. Absorption, because it's a 2 times multiplier, times the 1.2 for the ward. And so that's going to be 2.4. And then instead of rewriting it, I just do quote marks for repeating. So what you're seeing here is this is without using the shield wall command ability. Obviously, it degrades as more rend is coming in. This doesn't degrade as more rend comes in, but obviously you can't make it any better either. So this, just for point of reference, if I could make this a 3+ save, this would be 3.6. And then this would be 2.4. So this can never get better, okay? Anyway. Okay, so then looking at the weapons. So we've got a choice of 2 weapons plus a better weapon. I know from these rules that it doesn't get any better except for the +1 attack from the champion. I never put that into my calculations here because it's only for 1 guy in a unit. If you reinforce it, it gets even less of an impact because it's like, let's say it's 30 guys in a unit, that's 1 guy. So out of 30. So it's not having that big of an impact. That said, when I do my calculations in Excel, a lot of times I will take into account the champion, because sometimes they make a big difference, that 1 extra attack, particularly if the unit's relatively elite. Now we can see that the big difference here is the range. So without even looking at the profile further, I can tell you right now what we usually see is if the range is shorter, the attack profile is going to be better. And if it's longer, you're going to trade off some of the quality of the attacks for that. And that's exactly what we see here. The only difference in the 2 profiles is one of them is at a better hit. To hit starting point, which means with all-out attack, you can make it a 2+. This can never get better than a 3+. So anyway, at the end of here, at the end of each profile, I write their expected value before taking into account rend. So I can already tell you if the to hit and wound is one of them's a 3 and one of them's a 4. You just multiply attacks and damage. That's 2 and divide by 3. So this is 2/3 or 0.67 at -1. So they're doing, each guy is doing 2/3 wounds, doing 1 rend. So you have to adjust for whatever save quality you want to do. That's for the better weapon. And then if it's 2 4s, it's dividing by 4s. I can explain this in a Math Hammer video sometime, but anyway, 2 divided by 4 is 0.5. So I always write to 2 decimal places so that it's consistent. So this is a 33% improvement, but you're giving up the range. And then the guy with the better weapon is 2 times 2, that's 4 divided by 3, so 4/3 is 1.33 at -1. Again, I'm not going to go through the math, but that gives me a sense for how good the unit is. And if you really want to know what the champion would do, you just look at what the impact of 1 extra attack would be relative to what the base level attacks is. So 1 extra attack if you are starting with 2, is a 50% performance improvement. So for this guy, that would make it 1 wound, and for this guy, it would make it 7.75. So I can do that quickly in my head. Some things are harder to do. So looking at Mortek Guard, does this seem like a unit that's worth 150 points for 10 guys? They're relatively tanky, especially if they use their ability. Now this does count. They said that any command abilities that these guys know count as Ossiarch commands, right? I don't know if they said it has to explicitly say that it is. Here, I can go back and look at it real quick. Let's see. Flipping through the book. Sorry for the zoom. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Ossiarch commands are command abilities, sorry, that are either appear on the war scroll of a unit that has the Ossiarch Bone Reaper's keyword or included in the table below. So this is an Ossiarch command. So what that means when analyzing these guys is that every single Mortek Guard unit, so long as you have enough command points, can be putting themselves on unrendable for that turn if you want. This counts as an Ossiarch command. So that's cool. They're doing okay damage. Doing 2/3 or half a wound per guy is not a lot to write home about, and then one guy's doing better and one guy's the champ. But for basic infantry, they're pretty tanky. They're going to get the job done. What we also might like to see is what other kind of buffs there are in the book. So for example, if other hero units can buff Mortek Guard specifically or not. That could make a difference in how much value they have. GW often values their units based off of their implied synergies within a given book, not what they are just on their war scroll. So I'll have to discover that as I go through reading the book. For those of you out there that are keen-eyed, you might realize I made a mistake here on the Mortek Guard's output. Because, as I said, with taking into account the 6+ ward by default, because I don't think they can be taken as allies in any other book, I also didn't take into account their exploding hits. So I should do that. So this actually, because I've already written the book and I don't want to make it uglier, I'm just going to do my other way of writing this, which is to say I draw an arrow to show that there's a better version. So this is 2 times +1 to hit functionally. So that's actually better. It's this. So it's 5/6 essentially. This profile right here, I'm going to have to do down here because I made a mess, but this would be 2/3. So it's 0.67 minus 1. And then this profile here is 4 times, 15. So double, because it's the same profile as the Netherite blade. So that's actually 1.67. Again, the reason I missed this is because it's not on the war scroll itself, which is easy to miss when analyzing this stuff. And so you want to take into account the things that all the units are benefiting from all the time. So for example, when I'm looking at these abilities, I know that they've got their battle shock immune, but that doesn't impact my analysis on a war scroll. They got a 6+ ward, we talked about that, and then this, the exploding hits. And then the commands, I'm not taking into account every single possible command they could be using, the OCR commands, because at the end of the day, that's not necessary, because I don't want to analyze every single war scroll in every single possible permutation of things that could be happening, like +1 to wound on the kind of like charge reaction, counter strike, or improved rend. I don't want to be doing that for every single possible situation, because then it just gets a little unwieldy with how much work you have to do to get a sense for the unit. But that said, you know, the things that are applied all the time are probably worth taking into consideration. It's also possible that one of the 6 sub-factions might make the Mortek Guard better. If that's the case, I would write here underneath in some free space here in this sub-faction, which is obviously, let's say, the Mortek Guard sub-faction, this is what this weapon profile would look like. Or if there was a particular buff hero that's obviously a power pair with that unit, then I would say with this guy's ability. But when I'm writing my stuff, my normal analysis here, I like to keep it relatively simple and generic so that it applies more often than not. Okay, so now let's take a look at the other unconditional battle line, the Cavallos Death Riders. I'm going to be going through other War Scrolls faster than I did the Mortek Guard because I covered a lot of the basics there. So let's look at the normal stuff. So we're seeing that we've got, obviously this is the cavalry, so we have a mount. We have a champion that's adding 1 to the attack characteristic of that model's melee weapon, which is interesting because it doesn't specify which. So let's take a look at how they're armed. Each model in a Cavallos Death Riders unit is armed with one of the following weapons options, Naderite Blade or Naderite Spear, and all models in the unit must be armed with the same weapon option. So that's an or. Let's see. One model in this unit can be a Mortar Hecatos, add 1 to the melee weapon. So that's basically the same thing as saying either with a Naderite Blade or Naderite Spear. 1 in every 5 models can be a Necrophoros, add 1 to run rolls and charge rolls. Same thing as before. And then we have 2 independent rules. Before we look at those, let's just look at the keywords. So Death, Auxiliary Bone Reapers, and Cavallos Death Riders. Super simple. We can see that they move 10, have 3 wounds, a 4-up save, and 10 bravery. So the charge. After this unit makes a charge move, you can pick 1 enemy unit within 1 inch of this unit and roll a number of dice equal to the unmodified charge roll for that charge move. For each 5+, that enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound. In addition, this unit can move an extra 3 inch when it piles in if it made a charge move in the same turn. All right, so we got a few things to look at here. It's within 1 inch of the unit, and it's of the unit, not of each model, and roll a number of dice equal to the unmodified charge roll. So unmodified, I always like to underline this because that does make a difference if you're getting charge bonuses, like your standard bearer. So that's real easy to forget. You're rolling +1 here, and then you got to remember that doesn't impact this. So I might even write a note here. Doesn't affect impact hits. Okay, for each 5+, the enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So on average, it's like if you roll a 7-inch charge, and then it's 1/3 of that, so 7/3, right? So 2 1/3 mortal wounds. And then in addition, this unit can move an extra 3 inches when it piles in if it made a charge move in the same turn. Interesting is because usually when we see the extra 3-inch pile in, that's paired with, it's eligible to fight if it's within 6 inches instead of 3, but that's not what this is saying. This is just giving you the easy one that I wish would always exist, that you can move an extra 3 inches when you pile in. So you can move 6 inches, but that's only when it charged. So this is all lumped under this rule because it's a charge bonus. And then they've got Death Rider Wedge. It's a command ability, so it counts as an OSCR command. In the charge phase, the command can only be issued by this unit's Mortek Hecatos, and this unit must receive the command. Until the end of that phase, models in this unit can pass across other models with a wounds characteristic of 3 or less in the same manner as a model that can fly. Okay, I'm going to actually make a note here that this is a CA command ability, just so that I know that that's there. That's okay. You've got a lot of CPs, so if you need to fly over models, that's good. They don't have a rule that lets them like do flyover bombing runs or something like that. So it's more just to have mobility, and they only move 10, but remember you can give them in the movement phase 3 extra inches. But hold on, this is in the charge phase. So this doesn't even mean during the move. This is literally just for the charge so that you can land on the other side of an enemy unit if you want, as though they were a flying unit. Keep in mind, this army doesn't really have flyers. Nagash and Archon are flyers, to the best of my recollection. And then you've got the two units with big wings, but it's not per se an army that's thought of as a flying army or super fast. So this kind of helps make up for that a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna do their wounds bracket thing here real quick. Again, I'm gonna assume the 1.2 multiplier for having, what's it called? The 6+ ward. So that puts them at 7.2 wounds they each absorb if there's no rend. Doing some math here, 5.4 if they're at rend -1. 4.32 if they're at rend -2, and then they go back to 3.6 if they're, which is the normal value we have if you have a 6+ ward and 3 wounds. Functionally, I know I said in the last War Scroll that I'm not covering mortal wounds, that scenario, but technically that's implied. If they have a 4+ save or worse, then it's implied by at least the last rung, if not earlier, because they don't have a save at rend -3. Okay, and then looking at the actual attack profile here. So keeping in mind that they have exploding hits as a battle trait, and I left that out in the other video when I did the math on that initially, as you know. So that functionally equates to having a +1 to hit, but it doesn't apply to the mounts unless noted otherwise. So it's only on these 2 weapons profiles. So that's, let's see, functionally a 2+ and a 4+. So we're looking at 1.25 at -1 for each rider with a Naderite blade, or so this becomes divide by 3, so 1.0 at -1 for the spear. The spear has 2-inch range, same as idea as before. So these are basically just Mortek Guard on cavalry, which is easy enough to keep in mind. And this is 2 divided by 3, so 0.67, and they don't benefit from the weapons. So, yeah, the output you're getting for these guys, I think, let me look at the price real quick. That's important. This was 5 for 170. Like I said, kind of mid-elite, but they're unconditional battle lines, so you can just take as many as you want, up to a point, of course. They get charge, mortal wounds on the charge, just decent. They're a little more flexible with movement shenanigans. They're doing okay damage in combat. I like cavalry armies, so I would consider running them, but I don't know how they stack up with buffs that they could be getting from other sources and stuff like that. So we'll have to take a look at that a little bit later. But yeah, so there's the rest of the War Scroll.
All right. And there we have it. So I just want to say thanks again for watching the video and following along. We'll try to release these at a steady clip here so that you guys can kind of wrap up the series sooner than later, instead of waiting for as long as we have with my Math Hammer videos especially. As always, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, all the normal good YouTube stuff, and engage with us on Discord and or on YouTube in the comment section itself. Until the next one, where we'll cover the conditional battle line, Ryan out.